Okay, so I have the best job today, which is that I get to have the conversation that you all want to have around what is working in creative approaches to adding housing stock that Central Texans can afford. You'll notice I phrased that a little bit intentionally. I didn't say affordable housing. The reason I didn't say it exactly that way is because, yes, we want affordable housing. If you're familiar with the technical definition of that, that's included in what we're talking about. But we're also talking more broadly about housing Central Texans can afford. And we have each of the folks on our panel today is representing a different part of that conversation. And we actually have a theory around why we've structured the panel the way that we have. Think of our region in concentric circles. So we're thinking about the downtown Austin urban corridor. What are the opportunities there if you live right in downtown Austin? Think a little more broadly. Think about the area that the Austin Independent School District serves, which is broader throughout the region. And then think even more throughout the region. For example, communities like Round Rock and others outside of the Austin city limits. And what are the opportunities there? Those are really the perspectives that all of our panelists have today. So instead of trying to introduce them based on their bios, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So would you like to go first?
Thank you, Stacy. Thank you for having me today. Thank you all for sticking around. I was worried that everybody was going to leave with the mayor today. So thank you for staying for this part of the conversation. My name is Hannah Rangel. I lead the Built Environment Program area at the Downtown Austin Alliance. I think I have a singular title. I think I'm the Vice President of the Built Environment. So if somebody else has that title, let's meet and have coffee. So I lead our development policy and land use planning for downtown. So we look a lot every day at the increasing, our growing residential population downtown, how we're bringing more units online, and what downtown's role is in affordable housing. I've only been with the Downtown Austin Alliance for about a year, so prior to that, I call myself a recovering developer. So I've lived the site planning process that Mayor Watson described here in Austin, and prior to that was doing real estate development in Los Angeles. I have a master's in urban planning, did some affordable housing work, and started my career with the Smithsonian doing cultural heritage preservation. So I like to think I bring a really interdisciplinary approach to when we think about some of these issues.
Thank you. Jeremy.
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Jeremy Striffler. I'm the Director of Real Estate for the Austin Independent School District. And really my job is through the assets we own, whether it's our land or our buildings, to support our 73,000 students and our over 10,000 employees. And so that looks everything on a day-to-day from working with campuses to generate revenue for them by renting their facilities outside of school hours, so that way they can use that money to afford field trips, teacher appreciation events, supplies, and then at the district level, thinking about how we can use real estate to not only support things like our bond project, but also day-to-day in terms of we're identifying opportunities that maybe we haven't thought of before in terms of supporting our teachers and staff, and ultimately the students, really through the recruitment and retention efforts.
Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Heather Donahue. I'm principal architect and partner with Mod Architecture. We're a small firm up in Round Rock. We work in all over Central Texas. We are a commercial architecture firm. We also do multifamily and occasional custom residential. We come at this from a little bit different perspective. Since we are service, we have to wait for clients to come to us with an idea or a vision that we can partner with. But yeah, we're happy to be here.
Thank you. Glad you're here. So forgive me for going in order again, but I do want to kind of think about how this plays out from a geographic point of view. You guys might have seen some of the same news headlines that I have, and I found them really intriguing. Headlines like, we have vacancies in downtown office space. We've got large, shiny new buildings, and they are not fully occupied. We have housing shortages. What if we could take that vacant office space in downtown and turn it into residential units that we need so desperately? Can we do that?
No, next question. When Stacy reached out and we had our first conversation, she asked me this question, and I have been really eager to be able to have this discussion because we are reading all these articles and there is all this buzz. And to me, that's not buzz, it's noise. I think that it is distracting us from some of the bigger picture ideas and solutions. So adaptive reuse, converting office to residential is totally a thing. And we've seen it done in other cities. For Austin, we do not think it is a very good fit. There are a couple, we can go into how much detail you guys will allow me to, but Austin has downtown Austin, we're speaking particularly about the downtown core, has a very young building stock. Our downtown has doubled in the past decade. So when we're talking about some of those vacancies in office buildings, these are big new towers that still have a lot of debt and equity attached to them and business plans and pro formas, and also probably have floor plates that are not really appropriate for conversion. So we as an organization in the fall, we're hearing more and more activity around this and wanted to just kind of dig in and see what the data told us. So taking some established metrics that people have talked about recently, sort of floor plate size, building age, occupancy rate, so lower than 50%, we found that less than 5% of downtown Austin's buildings are appropriate for conversion. When you start to dig into those, maybe 40 or 50 buildings, there's a lot of reasons why those individual buildings become less and less desirable. So I'll never say no to a good idea. I would love to see a new conversion project in town, but there is one great conversion project that occurred in, I think, 2004. Blanking on the name of the property, but it's at like 8th and Guad. Again, we're always open to new ideas, but I am finding that the conversation, we are putting a lot of energy into that discussion, and I'd like to see us sort of say, good idea. I learned a phrase recently. There's a difference between a sounds good idea and a sound good idea. And I think this is one of these things, right? We have this problem and we have these two problems and maybe they can help solve each other. And that is certainly, Dallas is one of the leading cities that is doing this. And I'm a transplant, so I didn't take Texas history and culture, so excuse me. So I don't really know Dallas's history too well, but my understanding is, there was some oil there and there was some turn of the century, there's a lot of development. So they have a building stock that is, closer to 100 years old, and they created a residential downtown population with office conversion. So it is totally a thing and totally a tool. I would like to see us kind of move the conversation past that for Austin.
And if I can lead the witness a little bit, one of the things when we talked that I found interesting was the idea of we're all thinking about the big, visible, shiny skyscrapers, but we've got office product further outside Austin that is older and could be useful for that. Can you talk about a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a little out of my lane. I'm always supposed to focus on downtown, but my view is that office conversions on a much smaller tactical scale, particularly around transit corridors, is a conversation we should be having. Yes, we can produce 200, 300, 400 units downtown in some of these new towers, but change needs to happen on all scales, and it's supply, supply, supply. And so getting 6 units through a conversion near a future transit stop is to me just as meaningful. It's everything builds on each other. So I would like to see more conversation around sort of, low rise, older product, B and C class office outside the downtown core and C. And, there was, I think it was Mackenzie Kelly's office, Councilmember Kelly's office that recently produced or commissioned a report around office conversions, and they identified something like 16 properties outside the downtown core that are, currently on the market, totally vacant, and probably really good for conversion. And I was looking at the square footages, and those are more like 15, 20,000 square foot buildings, so you're talking about turning just a couple of units. But if the city wants to get in that business and start doing some conversions, I think that would be a great place to focus.
Thank you. Jeremy, what is AISD doing with respect to housing? So we were laughing earlier that I think a lot of folks are not aware that AISD is one of the largest property owners in the city of Austin, and you guys have a lot of land that you can use for a lot of things. What are you using it for right now?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I think one thing I would like to start is recognizing that I was brought in at the last minute.
It's true.
Our CFO was going to be here today. And the reason I bring it up is not that I'm not prepared to talk on the topic, but more so, he's not here because of the budget issues. And I think all of this discussion of affordability, especially around AISD that I'm going to address, is tied to the budget. And so we currently have a $50 million, well now $30 million deficit this year, due to an increased compensation package that we provide our teachers and staff at the beginning of the school year. The reason we're in a deficit is that the funding model has not changed at the state level. Further, we also have a recapture program that has not changed and is basically burdening us even further. And everyone in the room here who is a citizen in Austin is contributing property taxes, whether you're a renter or owner. And so this year, $900 million of our property tax revenue left the city and is at the state. And some of it is serving the purpose it was meant, which is being distributed to school districts that do not have as wealthy of a property tax base, but some of the money is being directed elsewhere and not towards especially our teachers and students. And so the district is being forced to think differently and say, how can we recruit and retain teachers in a city that is continuing to become more and more expensive? And how do we keep that alchemy that happens when not only when that student, that family member outside the classroom sees that teacher or the custodian or the bus driver or the front office, but they see him in the weekend at the grocery store, or they see him at ACL, or they see him at church, wherever it is, seeing the support staff and those teachers who are with our students the majority of the week, knowing that they live in our communities, I think has a true impact on the students' experience, because those teachers and everyone else at the district were able to bring that experience into their learning. And so it's not that disconnect where we don't understand the day-to-day of the challenges they're facing. We are kind of in it with them. And so the district does have a huge portfolio of land. And so we have started to identify opportunity where we can build housing to provide another option for our teachers and staff. It is not in lieu of paying them more. It is more so recognizing currently things are out of our control, outside of a lot of advocacy from all of us at the state level to change the system. So the money they do have in the wallet, how can we make it go further? And so we're saying, well, look, you need to have more housing options here in Austin, and we're starting in the rental side of it, though ownership is as equally important. And so currently in East Austin, we have the Coy site, which is an 18-acre campus. It's home to our Alternative Learning Center. They will continue to be on that campus, but they do not need the building that they currently reside in. It is much larger than the programming requires. And so we saw the opportunity to, one, build them a new facility on that campus, a much smaller footprint, and then use the rest of the land to bring housing. And so we have partnered with the NRP group, who has a full local team behind them, and we are planning over 500 units of housing, and at least half those units will be attainable. And so I appreciate the distinguishing. And so when we talk about attainable, really tapping into that idea of workforce housing, which often begins around in that 60 to even up to 120% of the median family income in here in Austin. And so, we've already submitted applications for rezoning and neighborhood plan amendments. So this summer you will see it come to Planning Commission and City Council, and we will be then engaging the community around some design aspects on it and other amenities, because we want the campus, part of it will be for our students, and we've got an architect already lined up, and we'll be designing a new school building, but there'll be public amenity space, public green space, because we want it not just the students, not just for the residents, but we really want it for the community, because it has been for so long. And that's the one thing we always have to keep in mind with our district sites, these are community assets. And so how do we maintain control of them, but how do we really make long-term investments in those community assets? And so we're starting with Coy and hoping to do more beyond that, because 500 units is amazing, but relative to 10,000 employees and even 73,000 families, it's just scratching the surface.
Thank you. Heather, do you want to talk about some housing for teachers and police officers and others in a different kind of way?
Sure. So back a couple of years ago in the spring of 2022, Joseph Claypool, who is a lieutenant in the Round Rock Police Department, came to us and said, hey, I have this idea. I have a piece of land that can be developed. It's got a house on it that is a girls' home. I believe it's connected through Teen Challenge. And I want to develop some housing. We affectionately call them tiny homes, but they're a little larger than that, for police officers, firemen, teachers. His wife is a teacher, so he has a special heart for them. And also a place for these girls who graduate from this home to go that they can actually afford. Because these folks that are in these fields that are just getting started in these fields couldn't afford, even in Round Rock, couldn't afford homes. So he came to us and we said, this sounds like a great idea. And so we developed what ended up being 28, we'll call them cottages, two-story, two-bedroom cottages on about 2 acres of land surrounding this teen home. And it's blossomed. The idea is taking off, which is wonderful.
And am I remembering right, it's around $1,300 a month, something like that?
It's just under 14.
Just under 14.
Yeah.
So as you think about product that we can make available, a 2-2 for $1,400 is something that a family could actually live in and utilize.
It's actually a 2-1, but yes, and the interesting thing that we discovered is not only does he have these young first responders, but he also has quite a few single parents, single moms and single dads that wanted to bring their families to this community. And he intended it for it to be a community. It is a community. He had the thing rented in less than 2 weeks entirely.
No doubt. So as we think about what made a community like that possible in Round Rock, that might translate or might not translate to other geographies, what are the things you think are unique about that?
Well, he was in what's called the ETJ, so he was outside the city limits in the county, so we didn't have to deal with all of the permitting process with the city, and we also didn't have to deal with the limit of residential units on a single piece of property. You have to understand, these are homes, they are individual homes, they are not apartments, so the advantage here is that each unit is completely separate from the other units. The residents get all 4 walls to themselves, which is unique from an apartment standpoint. But yeah, he didn't have to go through as much of the paperwork with jurisdiction. Even in Round Rock, it would have been more challenging. Not to say it can't be done. You just have to be more creative about how you go about it.
And that really is one of the themes of this discussion today, is about how can we be more creative within and beyond systems to be able to deliver this housing. One of my favorite sayings is the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. And it feels like a lot of what we're talking about as it relates to 500 units on a need of 10,000 staff. It's 500 more than we had yesterday. And what might it be tomorrow and how might it grow? Or 6 units in a residential conversion in the near city of Austin as compared to what we otherwise might have had. As you guys consider, what are those small things that are showing promise that are happening that you think are things we need to lean into more? And or, feel free to take the other side of this, what are the places that we're investing because we're trying to get scale that you're not sure we're getting the return on?
I'll go. We'll just keep going in order. Clarity locks up. I have so many things to say. One, everything the mayor said, we are at a monumental moment. I think that what we've seen over the past year from this council and this mayor, it is the dam coming forth, like the land development code, so much is so stale and not serving us that we are kind of doing the right thing and kind of getting in the right momentum. There are a couple, I heard your question, but I kind of want to comment on something you said about, why did this work? This was in the ETJ. What I was hearing was there was a lot of latitude in what they were able to do. I think in downtown, we're seeing that there's a lot of restriction on what's possible in terms of delivering particularly affordable housing. So yes, we can deliver supply, and like I said, supply. So I think that downtown has a really strong role in delivering just units to the market. We are very restricted in what right now we can do in terms of on-site housing. The cost per unit is very high. The downtown density bonus program, has not delivered a meaningful amount of units. So we've delivered 5,000 units over the past decade. Less than 100 of those are affordable. So less than 2% of the units in downtown under the density bonus program are affordable. What we have done in the face of that is delivered a lot of fees. So to me, if I was hearing the question where I wanted to kind of latch onto it was, there are different levers, and we talk about delivery of units, but we can also talk about delivery of fees. And so I do believe that downtown is, and we're at a place where we're looking to sort of rework the downtown density bonus program, and we're going to be asking a lot of serious questions about the value of on-site versus the value of fee. And I find myself mentally arguing about that too, because there's a lot of social benefits of on-site affordability and mixed income housing. We need to be looking to maximizing, to me, again, just maximizing output, whether it's market rate and affordable or fee. We just need to be focused on what we can do and being really cognizant of what the specific limitations are, whether by region or by area. So.
And for those of us less familiar with the terminology, on-site versus fee, can you explain that?
Yeah, an on-site unit is an affordable unit delivered in a mixed income community. So Texas does not have inclusionary zoning. My background started in California, so I was accustomed to the concept of inclusionary zoning is in the addition the requirement of affordable units on site with market rate units. Texas achieves that through incentives. So in exchange for additional density, you have to either deliver a unit on site that is affordable or a sort of an equal fee amount. So.
Thank you.
Did I do that?
You did,
okay.
Yes. So, and presumably those fees go to affordable housing placed elsewhere.
Yes, and I will say, the downtown density bonus program, so my data is a little stale now. I can't imagine the needle's moved too much, but, around $21 million in fee was either gathered or in the pipeline as of fall of 2023. That at that time had not been significantly deployed, and that was something that we were looking really hard at. I think the development community is happy to deliver fee if they're seeing it deployed and they're seeing the benefit there, and we were not seeing the fees going out. I know that has changed. I know very recently council deployed a lot of funds into projects, so we want to keep seeing that happening.
Thank you. And so as you think from AISD's perspective, how do these dynamics play out in your world?
The lever we have is very unique because it comes from the state level, and it's afforded to government entities, which is that we are able to create a public facility corporation, which in exchange for a developer coming to us and providing half the units at a level of attainability, again, really targeting workforce housing, the property is tax exempt, and they get to benefit from sale tax savings on the construction. And so that is afforded to every school district. So when we think about what levers are out there beyond just Austin and in Central Texas, all the other ISDs could decide to get into this. I think location is kind of the challenge, right? I look at a lot of schools that we have at the district. If it was just a blank canvas, you're like, oh, this is so buried in a residential neighborhood. Does density make sense here in the form that we're doing, which is, a 4 to 5 story apartment building, So density, where density is appropriate, I think is always important to keep in mind. But so we, as a government, right, we're incentivized with a developer to build workforce housing. One thing that strikes me over the last few years as I've been having this conversation so much is, we incentivize what you just talked about, big A capital affordable housing, but at a city level, we're not incentivizing developers to build workforce housing for everyone that the mayor just identified, makes the city run. And so, I'm curious, is that something even feasible for a city to pursue? Because it is going to continue to be an issue where Austin becomes a resort town where everyone who works at the resort lives elsewhere. And that doesn't make for a fun dynamic environment. So, I think that's a huge challenge right now, is that the cost of building the market rate is the same as the cost of building the workforce housing unit. So that subsidy needs to come from somewhere. And so where can we look to subsidize that without some monumental shift in market forces in terms of construction prices and inflation and interest rates? And then the other thing, this is more on I guess more of a challenge is there are so many wonderful familiar faces here in the room, but I would emphasize familiar. And so I think we need to continue to work to broaden the conversation, to make sure we're having more people in the room to talk about this, because it is not just, the project now of the advocates of affordability, but it is in the best interest of all the corporate users here that are in Austin as well, the health systems, the higher education systems. So we really need to do whatever we can to broaden the conversation, so it's not just the same group of us constantly talking to each other and cheering each other on. And the advocacy is great, but I think it needs to be much more widespread, not only for Austin, but all the surrounding areas also going to be quickly facing the same issue, as we're just going to force them to have affordability issues by constantly pushing everything out, right? And now there's higher demand, lack of supply, et cetera.
So as we think about outlying areas, and we're using one example of the Mustard Seed Village as a project that worked, are there other places you think something like that could work, whether it be in Austin, an outlying area in the region? Where do you think that kind of thing could work elsewhere?
Well, it works easiest in the county because of the less restrictions, but I think Austin is making some great strides in their recent movement towards allowing more units on a single piece of property. So that's a good step in a good direction. And the other part too, the headache of getting things passed through planning, the site plan review. I will say Austin is not our least favorite city jurisdiction to go through. That we do have others that we like even less.
That is the most diplomatic way I've ever heard that said.
Thank you. But Austin is seeing the challenge and starting to address that, and I think that's huge. I think that's really good, because developers, they don't like going through that process. It is expensive. It does add cost. And speaking towards the idea of cost and how do we finance these sort of things, I'd like to point out that Joseph Claypool, he was an individual. He was not a developer who did this. He saw a need. He took this on as his mission, and it took several tries for him to find funding. It was thanks to Amplify Credit Union for taking a risk on him, on his idea, and seeing the beauty of it, that he was able to create what he created, which is now starting to become a model. We've had other clients coming to us saying, hey, we like this idea. So it's a step.
And that's a great segue of access to capital, right? So he shopped that project to a number of places. It didn't look exactly like what typically goes in the box of what gets funded for housing.
Exactly.
And so it was difficult to find someone to finance it. Are there other recommendations any of you guys have about this is a really promising thing that can't get funded? That there's not financing available for it and whatnot. And if there were, that could be a big tool.
Yeah, I think in terms of downtown, as I was saying earlier, the downtown density bonus program has not done a great job of delivering units to downtown. And I think that for many years we have LIHTC and we have developers that focus on affordable housing, where we've also been trying to incentivize private real estate developers to produce income restricted units. I don't think that's been a success downtown. So if that's not working, but we think we can produce some fee, who steps in? And to me, it's the city. And so we have the Health South site. So if folks, there might be folks in the room who remember that and have some PTSD from that, but they're taking another run at it. And it's a prime opportune site downtown that can produce, can double the amount of units. We could produce 200 or 300 units there, which would surpass the amount produced by this downtown density bonus program. So if we can't correctly incentivize the market to produce on-site, I think it is the onus and responsibility of the city to step in. So I've mentioned California, which people probably don't like, and now I'm going to mention Paris, which people are probably going to like less. But there was this article in the New York Times like 3 months ago that was about the amount, the city of Paris's role in producing affordable housing, and not just that, producing opportunities for affordable businesses. And these stats were something like 1 in 4 Parisians live in income-restricted units, and something like 1 in 4 businesses in Paris are subsidized. And so you have this sense of one of the most organic, captivating, beautiful cities in the world is highly socially engineered, and it is the role of the government to do that and to ensure affordability, both from a residential sense and an economic sense, to produce that thing that, if we've had the opportunity to go, I was 18, I got a tongue ring, it was a thing that was many years ago, but we've all, if you've had the opportunity to go, it's an amazing city. And so bringing that back to Austin, if we're not having success downtown in correctly incentivizing developers to deliver units on site, to me, it's really the city's role to step in. So Health South is something I'm really excited about. The hobby building is another, so that's state level, so that's a whole different kind of cast that we have to work with. But that's a site which, by the way, in our research came up as a prime site for office conversion. But what is really more prime there is redevelopment. So even when we talk about buildings that fit the metrics for conversion, the real opportunity is in redevelopment. We could deliver hundreds and hundreds of units on the hobby site, in the next couple of years. So that was a long-winded way of saying I think the city needs to play a stronger role, at least downtown.
Any other thoughts on that? Access to capital structures that could make promising things actually happen?
I think if I reflect on what we as a government entity did was when I joined the district, just first took a breath to say, what do we have? Like, what do we own? And taking time to inventory everything. So 2,200 acres of land, while might to a degree be somewhat obvious on a superficial level because it's centered around the campuses, but there are bits and pieces here and there where it's like, well, what's this for? What's that for? And so at the city level, at the county level, also taking the time to inventory, like, what do you own? What are your assets? To identify opportunities, and some of them are pretty low-hanging fruit that don't, disrupt, and from the school district's point of view, don't disrupt campus operations and learning, and I can imagine from a city or a county level where, this isn't rocking the apple cart, that like, this is an obvious that just was hidden for so long because no one's looking hard enough, but often we're going so fast that we're not taking the time to be really proactive in how we think about these things. Too often, it's someone coming to us, a developer per se, and saying, "Would you do this?" And well, now I'm bound to a decision that I wasn't really even ready to make. And one thing that I've, outside of my role in the school district, been working with is the Austin Bridge Builder Alliance has been having a conversation around religious institutions about the land they have, and many are facing aging populations that are not filling the baskets on Sundays, and so these churches have deferred maintenance and they're under the threat of closing, but by looking at what they have, and often it's excess land, that could be an opportunity to not only monetize in a way to help cover deferred maintenance, but also keep parishioners on site. You could have a senior living type development right next to the church. Guess who would benefit from that, and who also could build that sense of community, because they'll be the ones going over to the parish hall on Wednesday nights for cards, play bridge or something, and on Sunday going to worship. And so I think especially in the urban core, there's a lot of opportunity to look at those two, and so that's a different type of inventory that needs to be taken. But I think there's a lot of opportunity when we think about these institutions that anchor our city and our county in terms of saying, well, what do they have, and what could we, but encourage them to lead the decision, and not just everyone rush to their door and say, you should do this. They really need to be in the driving seat. That's when it will be the most successful, but encouraging them to take the time to at least make that decision first. Do you even want to do this?
So I think what I'm hearing you say is being proactive about where the assets are, and then a unified vision around what we're trying to accomplish. And things like, when I hear you give that example, I'm thinking about intergenerational housing, for example. That's such an issue that we're segregated by age in a lot of ways in a lot of communities, but if we wait for a developer to knock on a landowner's door and say, here's my idea for how I want to use your land, versus those who have the property having a vision and a strategy that goes beyond their jurisdiction, quote unquote, and then they can have collaborative conversations that could come up with something better.
Yeah, absolutely, and recognizing that sometimes the answer is no. That sometimes, like for the school district, there's some properties that are for buildings. Like, no, we cannot touch that. But here's what we can, you know.
You also just heard us, in quick succession, your question was around financing, but we named, institutional partners, the city, the school district, religious institutions. You talked about institutional players in this arena and their roles and opportunities. I will say on the financing side, capital markets are tough right now, right? Projects, we are thankfully, in a moment, we are catching our breath, at least downtown, and that's largely driven by capital markets. So it seems even more opportune for large institutions who maybe can have lower leverage and more equity or more capital to deploy to be able to pick things up in the market. So I mean, I'm not suggesting ASD goes out and buys a bunch of apartment buildings. You guys have enough to manage, but it's a good opportunity. Is it a good time for the city? And then shifting to the religious institutions and their contractions and how are we going to maximize our land? This is a difficult time in capital markets, but for some of those players, I think it's sort of like, they talk about millionaires are made in down markets and nobody's trying to make money, we're trying to deliver housing, but what it means is that there is opportunity.
And I think the institutions have the opportunity.
Yes, institutions have the opportunity.
We can charge as little or as much for the land as we want.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the huge lever that the developer also, especially in a market like Austin, so challenging, is the cost of land continues to rise. And so that's all getting passed into the cost, the pro forma for the units. Yeah. And so if the institution says, well, this is the mission, and the mission trumps the cash, and I'm not saying that's easy, but like for the district's point of view, for the Coy site, the mission is the retaining and recruitment of teachers so we can have full class, our schools fully staffed so we do not need to go to worst case scenarios, right? And also we cannot increase enrollment if we're not fully staffed. I mean, enrollment's another lever we have, right? Because the funding model is the dollars follow the student, but like, what good is it to have a classroom of 40 kids without a teacher? And we don't want classrooms of 40 kids either. I mean, but like you have huge waiting lists, what's the point? So
whereas if you're only looking with the private lens, you're looking to maximize cash flow, you're looking to maximize your return on investment, et cetera, even if all you're trying to do is run a profitable business and not trying to get the most out of it, but when you're an institution, your objective is different. And so your calculus can be different, which gives you a lot more options.
Right.
That's right.
I think that the idea of partnerships with folks like Joseph Claypool and institutions or whatever would be a great way to start expanding some of those ideas that others may have, the missions, the visions that the Josephs out there have, because it is a challenge when you're an individual trying to find funding for it or find a way to make it happen, and they don't necessarily know who to talk to. So going back to that conversation of broadening who we talk to. You see a lot of familiar faces. Let's find some more of those faces to talk to.
Absolutely. Okay, guys, it's your turn. I've had lots of questions. I have lots more if you want them, but I have also promised to get you out on time. We had a graduation yesterday. We have a 6-year-old graduation at 12:30.
My most important meeting of my day.
There you go. So I promise to make sure everybody makes it to whatever graduations or other plans you have for the rest of your day. But before we do, I want to give you all the chance to ask some questions. And I will bring my mic out to you so that the folks on our live stream have an opportunity to hear your question. Questions or comments? We got one over here.
Hi, thank you. Great panel. My question is about sustainability and how the money that's available federally and or just the more efficient operations of more sustainably built and operated buildings could be playing into your capital stack and operations budgets. And is that at the forefront of what you're thinking about and doing? And if not, why not?
Who wants to take that?
Did you mean sustainability from like an environmental sustainability standpoint? I'm just going to take that phrase and talk about something that I've been thinking about a lot. We were talking earlier about the mental map of talking points and how when somebody just gets near your talking point, you sort of, you seize that opportunity to talk about what you want to talk about. So what I will share is when we're talking about office conversion, so I said I started my career in cultural heritage preservation, but I spent a good amount of time at the National Trust for Historic Preservation in the early 2000s, and we talked a lot about the greenest building is the building that's already been built. And so office conversions, I think, there's a lot of merit in leaning into that as a city, not in downtown, probably, but sort of outside the downtown core, we can talk about the sustainability standpoint of some of these office conversions, sort of more low-rise office buildings. So I just wanted to, I don't know if that was the question, but I wanted to seize on the vocabulary and share that point, so.
Any other thoughts on sustainability as part of your strategy?
I think it always has to be at the forefront if it's part of your mission. And like for the district, sustainability is a key value for us, especially as we implement like this bond program, and we're building 25 essentially new school buildings over the next 5 years. And so when we went out to RFP on the Coy site, we made sure that value was there, and we had our director of sustainability review every proposal, and that was a scoring part of the metrics of how everyone was scored and how we ultimately selected our development partner. And I do understand, you know, the value of that, like the existing building. I think it always has to be put on the table and considered, but you have to look at the reality of the cost and like the infrastructure. But you know, where we can do that, and some is dictated by like the history of them, but like, you know, Pease Elementary downtown, we're converting that to an early childhood education center with United Way. And you know, it's a great way to reuse that building, bring students back, and extend the life, and you know, rather than just, you know, try to go build it elsewhere, you know.
Thank you.
So today I've heard two different things. From one of our attendees earlier, I heard from him, he asked me the question, how do I find out what's going on and how I get involved in this community? And it's not like he's a resident for many years here, but is really concerned about what we're doing and where we're going. And today I heard you all speak about the need for bringing more people to the table, more people into the room, making sure that more people in our citizenship understand what we're faced with and help us build the solutions that we're trying to drive. Everything from what the mayor spoke about to your amazing work on helping us make sure that our first lead people in the community, our teachers, our firefighters, our EMS workers, all of those people have a place in our community. And I love the idea of going and meeting them at the grocery store, not just in the classroom, but seeing them out in our community, because that's what I grew up with, and it's why community is a big piece of who I am. So your insight on that would be so great, and anybody's insight of that would be so greatly appreciated, so I can work on it, so I can act on it.
Thanks, Beth. Thoughts on how do we get more people who aren't in this room involved in what we're talking about?
I think one of the things we can do is let's go, this is Central Texas, let's go beyond just here in Austin. Let's do this in Round Rock. Let's do this down in Buda and Kyle. Let's physically change locations, so maybe we can change the makeup of the room too.
Good call.
Don't go to next door, I would say. It's a challenging, so I make the joke about next door, but, and I was thinking earlier about, you know, how we bring people in the conversation. We're seeing a lot of familiar faces. The recent, you know, Home 1 and Home 2 and ETOP, I mean, that was a public debate. I mean, we had, you know, people that were not previously involved in the housing discussion got deeply involved. I think it is a really challenging time. We're kind of, you know, not just in Austin, but, you know, at a national level, sort of in a post-truth environment where your opinion you can take as fact, and there's a lot of misinformation. I think it's a really challenging time when we talk about bringing people in the tent and giving them the correct and right information. So I don't have the answer. I think I'm highlighting the challenge. You know, we can all kind of go out there and do our advocacy work, and I think, you know, Jeremy, you were saying that your next door neighbor wasn't aware that AISD is so actively involved in affordable housing as it is. So I think just sort of trying to broaden the tent, continuing to broaden the conversation, but it's in the face of a really challenging environment. What we talked about before, you know, I was mentioning that I think, you know, we're in a monumental moment that's really scary for a lot of people. You know, Austin is very much in its adolescence. You know, you mentioned earlier you know, the best time to plant a tree is 25 years ago or today. We just planted the seeds. You know, what happened last week at council, we will see those benefits in 15 years or in 10 years. You know, those are things that aren't going to occur tomorrow. But people are used to living one way, people are used to doing one thing, and we are, just like adolescence, it's tumultuous and wild, and we're trying to lay the right foundation for the future. So didn't quite answer your question, but that's just my take on what's happening in Austin right now.
I would just add, it's nothing new, but encouraging people to accept the invitation. I mean, our efforts can only go so far in terms of like telling people there's a meeting, there's a, this or that, but someone actually has to say, yes, I'm going to show up. And maybe you can't make the meeting, at least read the materials, like go direct and like try to get more informed. But I mean, it's not a new concept, but it's just continually surprising because I get, at least at the district, often slammed that who's in the room doesn't reflect the community. I'm like, well, I can't drag everyone out the front door to like come to the meeting. And so, if you don't, accept the invitation yourself to something you normally wouldn't, but maybe also bring someone with you and say, okay, well, the two of us, we're going to go listen in on this community meeting and at least find out what's going.
Stacy's next wine date. It's going to be really fun.
Hi, and this isn't so much of a question as a comment, and it piggybacks off of what you just said, and that is, as parent of 2 AISD students, I regularly receive text invitations to various input sessions, and so I commend AISD for offering those invitations. And to your point, there are lots of communications out there. There are lots of, just this past weekend, an opportunity to provide input on I-35 and the design of that. So there is a two-way responsibility with that. But thanks to organizations like, and Downtown Austin Alliance as well, for providing those opportunities for input.
Thank you. Ooh, I heard we can offer childcare at those events. That was the suggestion. Sandy.
Thanks, Stacy. This is more of a question for the mayor, but he's not here. But I just would like
We'll do our best.
yeah. Mayor for a day, mayor for a minute. Yeah. I think what the council did last week is absolutely the right direction. But let's, and this may be too micro, and we don't know the answer to this yet, but what I'm musing about is, say you have a decent-sized lot, look at Allendale or Hyde Park, and a developer buys a house, and they're going to scrape it. They can put 3 units on there now, right, conceivably. They could put 1 unit that would be, say, $1 million, $1.2 million, $1.5 million, whatever that market relates, or they could put 3 units on there. From an idealistic point of view, each of those units would be $400,000 or $500,000, adding up to what the single house would be, and that would be fine for density, but not necessarily, but the market would say, hey, I can put 3 units up and charge $1 million each. So again, that's decently good for density. It may not do a whole lot for affordability. That's a balancing act, market versus financing versus what would be ideal. And those two may or may not be in sync with each other. Any thoughts, maybe from an architectural, working with developers point of view, and not that developers are evil, they're out to make a profit as well as provide a service. But how do we balance that so we can achieve as many of those lofty goals as we can with these changes?
That is an incredibly challenging question because it is a balance between the cost and what the developer is going to make off of it. And I don't know that we have all the answers yet. I think it's going to depend jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Obviously, we're in Austin, so we're talking about Austin. But yeah, I think it's going to take some of those visionaries to step out of, oh, it's all about profitability, to really be able to answer some of those questions.
Time for one more question. Right over here.
Are you as entities looking to the state to see their timeline of when they're finished with their properties?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
As you as entities, so this is addressed to you two, are you visiting with the state on their timelines of their facilities? Because right now, I'm equity. So I'm aware that TechStock has properties coming available on MOPAC or other parcels. So are you all having those discussions? Because we sure are.
So you're talking about state-owned properties?
Yeah, state-owned properties. They would gladly deal with you rather than having a bid process from private equity.
Thoughts?
Should pick up some TechStop properties.
I think more so what I have found is that other government entities are reaching out to discuss the playbook and say, how do we do this? You know, Cap Metro saying, we've got some land, tell us more because we have our bus drivers and we need to do it. And city union, employee unions saying, how can we bring this to us as well? So, you know, the district itself is not in, you know, going to be in a strong position to develop it, but we can certainly at least share our learning to encourage other entities. And we do have very close relationships, you know, at least locally here, we always have a joint subcommittee of the city and the school district and the county that meets often. And I sit on like the ULI Affordability Council, and that has multiple government entities with affordable developers coming together. So I think it's just being forthcoming with how it works. And at least from the district standpoint, we're happy to share because it's in our interest for others to do this and bring more workforce housing onto the market, because it's going to help bring some rents down, but also give more options.
I think we have time for one more question. You had your hand up.
Yes, I wanted to try to connect the dots on a couple of things. Pease School downtown seems like it would be a great site for a public-private investment with a 40-story tower. There's a lot of land. Can you comment on that, please?
Sure. I mean, in terms of the existing building, it has to remain for education purposes. Thus, we're using childcare. I think could be a thought for down the road once we get the childcare up and running to say, are we maximizing that site? Because there is, I mean, it's a full city block, and so definitely something to discuss. In the meantime, my focus is though getting those kids in the building and getting that affordable childcare available as soon as possible.
And if I can comment on that from a downtown standpoint, we are super excited about the prospect of early education at Pease, because we are lacking childcare downtown. It's also adjacent to the future Woolridge stop, so there's a lot of connectivity around transportation, the job, transportation, and childcare fit. So I've been encouraged by that. I wanted to just maybe, since I have the mic, I want to make an offer to AISD, because so going back to the very beginning, yes, there is an office vacancy challenge downtown right now. It's not, I mean, let me also say we are still 80% occupied. That's really good. We expect to peak around 26% vacancy. We're nearly there. So like we think we know what's happening downtown. We think we're getting ready for a new normal. There is an opportunity for new uses downtown. So if Jeremy's trying, maybe there's an opportunity where you can liberate a campus somewhere else for housing, and you can develop a magnet school and an office tower downtown, and it's a tech and business magnet school. And I think it's a good idea. We should talk about it. But what I'm highlighting is that there is other opportunity for new uses downtown. I know we're talking about affordability and really a housing fit here, but I just wanted to highlight that there's this synergy and there are opportunities for different uses downtown. It made me think a bit about the educational question.
Institutional collaboration happening live on stage right in front of you. So I'm going to give our panelists the last word, and I'm going to ask each of you to comment on one question. And since we've started with Hannah every time, I'm going to start with Heather. What is, if our audience here remembers only one thing from today's conversation, starting all the way from Kendall and Mayor Watson's conversation all the way through this good discussion, what is the one thing you want them to remember?
I think the one thing that we need to remember is that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution to a very, very challenging problem. There are lots of parts and pieces, and there's going to be different ways to solve the problem or part of the problem in different places. So we just have to remember to be open to those new weird ideas, and be willing to talk about it, have conversations.
Thank you. Jeremy?
I think we do have multiple levers that are available to us. Some are hidden right now, these hidden assets that I've talked about with land. But there are also some that, as a community, we can collectively try to pull, which is being strong advocates that, like you saw successfully at the city level, yes to, the changes of development code, but also saying the state level, like what do we need, and not always having to be in a do more with less kind of situation. And so advocacy from Austin and the surrounding area to go to the state and be clear with what we need, because it's support of all these elements that will, even the ADU proposition that was up at the state last time, that didn't get passed. Like, these things that, like, we shouldn't constantly we should be weird, as the mayor said, but like, we'll burn ourselves out if we have to be weird alone. And so how can we think to the larger Central Texas and to the state level to try to make some huge moves?
Two things. One, I hope you learned the phrase, the difference between a sounds good idea and a sound good idea, because I love it. It's just like, wordplay is fun. But I think, I've kind of said it in a couple different ways, but I think we're headed in the right direction. I think that what we've seen from this council and this mayor over the past couple of years, we're in our adolescence. It is a challenging time, but we are headed in the right direction. And we will see the fruits of our labor bear out, I think, over the next 10, 15 years. And getting to your question of, the math around one house, three house, yes, it's uncharted. We don't, to some degree, this is all an experiment, but so is life, so is everything. And cities are one big experiment all the time. But I believe that we are trending in the right direction.
Awesome. Please join me in thanking our panelists for today for a great discussion. I really appreciate it. Before you all head off on what's next for the rest of your day, Mayor Watson made a joke that he said, I'm going to make news and tell you it's 2024 during his conversation. I'm actually going to make news and tell you something that Amplify Credit Union is doing as a first in the industry. This summer, Amplify Credit Union will become the first and only provider of fee-free commercial banking services. We are pumped about it. So a lot of this conversation, why does fee-free commercial banking have anything to do with the Affordability Summit? Here's why. What we heard is we have to remove the obstacles to affordability, and we understand the role that institutions, organizations, and nonprofits play in that ecosystem. And if we can make them doing their business more affordable, then we can help them deliver more wages and more jobs in Central Texas and get access to this housing that we want to become more affordable. So this summer, Amplify Credit Union will be the first and only provider of those things. We are very pumped about it. Would love to tell you more about what that means for you as leaders, what that can mean for this community and for the broader mission that we have happening. But it is our honor and privilege to be part of the Central Texas community, to get to convene conversations like this one, and to get to be partners with you all. So with that, I'd like to thank you for joining us today, and please give yourselves a round of applause for being part of this conversation.